Welcome back. Um, I have finally put my thoughts in order enough to talk coherently about Frankenstein. It's time. I finished reading it a while ago. I've just been really busy. So I'm trying not to put pressure on myself for my book analysis videos because analysis takes time, but then also processing what you've analyzed also takes time. And I don't have a ton of time. So don't start looking for a consistent upload for my classic book journey. That being said, this is my first classic book journey, like officially. I'm calling this my first independent study. That sounds professional. That sounds official. Maybe we'll do that. Anyway, this is the first time I've read a book and actually analyzed it outside of school. And the last time I did it, it was like freshman year of college. It was a while ago. So I'm a little rusty on the skills. And I also don't think I've gone this deep into a book before. I've done cursory, like surface level analysis of certain books. The Great Gatsby, for example, I read in high school and I also read in college. And we did a short analysis of it, but it was like a week or 2 week long unit. So it wasn't very much time on it. Um, so I don't actually know if I've dove this deep into a book before. It was really fun. That being said, I did break it into sections, my thought process and my feelings into sections. So the first thing I'm going to go with, and I think I'll keep this pretty consistently, is expectations I had going into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Um, I expected a lot, if I'm being completely honest. I try not to do that. I try not to put too much pressure on a book just based off of like what other people say about it and its impression with society and the world and everything. I try to go in with my own perspective, but it's Frankenstein. Like, how do you? It created a genre, or it's like credited to making a genre. Like in one of my favorite genres, I don't exclusively read science fiction and fantasy, but I read a lot. It's definitely my favorite like sub or genre of reading would be fantasy and science fiction. So we had high expectations. I expected the classic Frankenstein story, mad scientist, misunderstood creation, that kind of thing. Uh, I expected some creepy and horror aspects and feelings, and I feel like I did get that, but not as much as I was expecting for the horror side of things. Like it was horror in more of a psychological sense, in like an emotional sense, not as much as an actual horrific detail kind of sense. If you're following me there. So I found that really interesting because that was very different than what I was expecting, but not in a bad way. Did it fall short, meet, or exceed expectations? I cannot believe this, but it exceeded my expectations. It was so good. It had those elements I had discussed. It had obviously the mad scientist, Frankenstein creation storyline. It's the original one. It did have some of those horror aspects in a different way than I expected, but I did not plan for the beautiful prose and the beautiful writing of Mary Shelley. Her skill is one of a kind. I loved her prose. It was so good. I also have a category on readability, like how easy was it to read. I'd say it was pretty easy to follow along, considering it was released, and I think it was either 1816 or 1817. It was pretty easy to parse through. It's not like a light read, so you can't just open it up after. I couldn't at least just open it up after a long day at work when I'm brain dead. Not one of those kind of reads, but I didn't have to like really analyze and take it apart sentence by sentence or phrase by phrase like I do some books. So I thought it was pretty easy to follow along with, which is nice. Um, my next note said my thoughts, and it just said, I have so many thoughts on this book, which is true. I'm going to start with going like a little honorable mention to some certain characters. Honorable is shady in this first one. I'm going to start with Victor Frankenstein himself. Oh my goodness. At this moment in time, I cannot think of a literary character I despise more than Victor Frankenstein. Let me be very clear here. Uh, I've read somewhere, I've read that some people urge you to look at it more in a like look at Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, in a more sympathetic light, and to think of him more as like the tragic hero kind of thing, and not the monster of the story. Respectfully, I disagree. I completely disagree. He brought all of his misfortune on his own. Like it was all his fault. And yeah, okay, that's the point of a tragic hero. I've heard some say, which is true, that's valid. I don't see any heroism in it. The point of tragic heroism is it's almost like being a hero by mistake, if I'm understanding it correctly. Where's the heroism with Frankenstein? There is none. There is none. There is no, I found no redeemable qualities in Frankenstein. Maybe I'll have to read through and look again from you through a different lens, but no way, no way. Uh, and I will say my little caveat in the redeemable qualities, he does apply moral judgments to himself after the fact, but it does not, like, you can regret your actions. You should if you're committing really wrong actions like Frankenstein did. But it doesn't change the fact, and it does not excuse you from the consequences, because you've already committed those acts. You've already done the bad thing. You can't just say sorry or, oh man, I feel so bad, and expect things to be fine. Own up to your consequences. And that's another issue I have with Victor. He did not have to face any consequences. The people around him faced his consequences for him. He didn't have anything happen to him. He went to jail for a little bit, but he was sprung. That's it. What do you okay, I'm gonna try really hard not to get really upset about it, because I have a lot of feelings about him. Okay, my first gripe with Victor Frankenstein is that he is so incredibly selfish. And I can, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is when people are overly self-involved. He's really selfish, and he holds himself to such a high esteem that I just wanted to pull my hair out. It was so infuriating to me. Even talking about it now, just thinking back on it, I'm like, dude, get some humility. Calm down. It's not that deep. Ooh. One quote I think that really shows off how egotistical Frankenstein was when he had first decided he was going to go to university, right? He said, there only remained a resolution to return to my ancient studies, that would be the studies of creation of life, and to devote myself to science, for which I believed myself to possess a natural talent. Let me read that without stumbling. For which I believed myself to possess a natural talent. Now, this quote in itself, like just listening to it, it doesn't sound that bad. Like, okay, yeah, he's naturally good at that, and he's noticing that. That doesn't seem that bad. By itself, outside of context, not that big a deal. However, when you look at the context surrounding this quote and see what is happening at this time in his life, it shows just how arrogant he is. So my main piece of evidence, because I'm going to have evidence for my claims here, is how he interacts in his first impression of the very first professor. Not even his favorite professor, definitely his least favorite professor, but not even his a professor, just like a random. It's his first professor that's actually going to be teaching him at the university. I can understand, excuse me, Dolly. I can understand him being insulted with that first meeting. So just to briefly review, he goes to the school intentionally to start introducing himself and meeting his professors. And the first person he meets, forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong, is Crimpy. I think it's Crimpy. First person in the science department that he's going to be studying, the reason that he went to this university, right? It's a tense conversation. Crimpy asks him about his research in the past and what he's interested in studying, and Frankenstein shares, oh, creation of life, da 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 da. And immediately is shot down by the professor. Immediately told that all that he has studied is complete crap and you need to like reset your entire foundation. That's going to sting. That's going to be insulting. I understand that. Totally valid to feel upset in that moment. I'm not upset with Victor for that. It's when he takes that and then he looks at the list of books that the professor gives him to reassess his understanding of science. And he says something to the manner of, I'm trying to find my quote. He claimed he'd read these authors as youth and found nothing of importance within the books. So he's saying, no, I'm actually not going to read your reading list. I've read it before when I was a child, and I didn't understand any of it in an important light. Like, I didn't think it was important, so I'm just not going to read it. What do you mean? He's your professor. And also, I have read countless books multiple times, and every time I read it, I learn something new, especially if you're rereading it as an adult. A prime example of that would be me rereading the Gregor the Overlander series right now. The last time I read that series, I was 12 years old. And I thought it was just like the super fun tale with these dramatic changes and all of that. And now I'm seeing themes of family. I'm seeing so much more messaging in the series than I did as a child because I have life experience now. I've grown up. Victor does not understand that we need to do these kind of things. So that drove me crazy. But I'm also going to read, that's what all of my sticky notes here are, little excerpts I'm going to read. I only have 3. I'm not going to like reread the whole thing. But I want you to experience Frankenstein's thought process as he meets this first professor, right? Okay. So they're in Crimpy's office. He gets the list of books and everything. And this is what his internal monologue was. Crimpy was a little squat man with a gruff voice and a repulsive countenance. The teacher, therefore, did not prepossess me in favor of his pursuits. Let me just reread one particular part. Did not prepossess me in favor of his pursuits because of his gruff voice and repulsive countenance. So that's basically, if I'm reading it correctly, if I'm understanding what's going on here, that's basically Frankenstein going, I don't like the way that you look or the way that you speak to me, so you have nothing to teach me. Excuse me, what? You came for his expertise. He is the reason you're at this university, is to learn from people like Crimpy. Why are you automatically just devaluing all of his work to get to the position he is in because you didn't like the way he spoke to you and you don't like the way he looks? That is, everybody works with somebody or learns from somebody that they don't like at some point in their life, right? It happens to all of us. It's not necessarily in school either. It could be like training at a job. It could be learning a new sport or going to a class to learn a new skill, or just interacting with somebody that you don't enjoy in life. That's part of life, buddy. You suck it up. That's just what you do. Ugh. Makes me so angry. So that's just him with the professor. That's the arrogance that we get the minute he gets to school, right? And then I have another quick quote that I'm going to read about his thought process when creating life and his goal once that life is created. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. Not technically wrong, like he would have created them. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Oh my gosh. So that's him basically saying, it's just like I'm God, guys. Like, I'm the best dad in the world. My creation should view me as perfect. Excuse me, what? What? Can't stand it. So not only is he incredibly arrogant, which was my first point, and I feel like I brought some pretty good evidence for that, he was such a neglectful family member. he was an awful person to his family. Like, yes, he spoke about them and love, and he did love them, but his family would only matter, like it would only come up when in his mind when it affected him in some way. He didn't think about his family at all while he was at university until he's already made his mistake. He's already created his creation. He's already created life and now is regretting it and goes, "Oh, I got a letter that I guess I'll finally open after months from my family." And it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. I'm going to give more specific instead of rambling. I'm going to give 3 specific examples of how he treats his family poorly or people around him poorly. Well, his family. We're going to start off with Elizabeth. Poor, sweet, misguided Elizabeth. So Frankenstein spends his entire life in love with this woman and thinks about her constantly, yet never thinks to write to her when he's at university. Okay. When he finally comes home and the topic of marriage comes up, Elizabeth thought that he didn't even love her because he refused to marry her. Let me repeat. He refused to marry her. Again, we look at it in context. The creation is like asking for him to create another person, so he's not so freaking lonely because his dad ignores him, but we'll get to it. And how does he respond to Elizabeth's concerns that he doesn't love her? He jets off to England with his bestie. What? No, that is not the way we handle that. That is not the way you treat somebody that you love. That's not how this works. Then after they finally marry, he won't even tell her. He's still upset when they get married because he's decided, screw it, I'm just going to marry her. And if something happens, whatever. But he's really upset about it. He's pouting about it because he's the world's best pouter, I guess. And he won't even tell her why he's upset. He won't even tell Elizabeth why she's upset on their wedding day, on their wedding night. He's there sulking in the boat, and she goes, "Why are you upset?" And he's, "No, I can't tell you." The heck is that? What? Also, I will stand by the point that had he just spoken to the people around him and told them what happened, specifically in this case, told Elizabeth before their wedding night why he was upset, the creation chasing after him, she might still be alive. She probably would still be alive because she wouldn't just be lying in bed waiting for her husband, which is exactly how she died, which is tragic. No, he had to be like super emo, nobody understands me, without even trying to explain what's happening. That his death is on her hands. No, other way around. Her death is on his hands. I firmly believe that. And then we get to Henry. Oh, another poor, sweet, misguided soul in this book. There are a lot of those, unfortunately. Henry is a classic example of that best friend who drops everything to be there to support their friends, which is a fantastic. No, we should have a bit of a backbone. But he did. I feel like he did. He had his own goals. Primarily, he wanted to study language and he wanted to see the world. But he also valued his friendship with Victor. He valued him as a person. So he wanted to help Victor when he needed help. We can see that in multiple examples. The first one being the very day that Henry gets to the university to study language. The very first day he gets there, he sees the state of Frankenstein and immediately nurses the man back to health. He spends months nursing this man back to health. And I do understand Victor going back to Geneva as soon as he's better because that's when his brother died. So he's going back to be with his family. That part, I'll give Victor that one. I understand that. But then later on, when they're reunited, and this is the whole marriage part with Elizabeth, he said, "No, I'm not going to marry you until this thing happens," but not explaining to her what this thing is, just saying, "No, not yet." Anyway, Henry, he jets off to, well, I guess not jets off because they sail off to Europe. They spend some time in the English countryside, and Henry is trying to be this positive source, this optimism in Victor's life and make him happy and understand the joys of the world and how great his life is. And Frankenstein just sulks in the corner the whole time. He's like, no, no, with the fault of my own actions, the consequences of my own actions are too much to bear, but I'm not going to tell anybody about it. I'm just going to suffer in silence. I can't. Um, Even through all of this and this ridiculous behavior of Frankenstein, Henry is still there trying to be a good friend and trying to support Victor, trying to make him feel better. Now, all of this is not anything crazy. I feel like it's nothing crazy for a friend to do. In fact, I would probably do, and I have done similar things where I look forward to helping my friends. I really want to make sure that they're in a good place too. It's something I care about. If I'm healthy, they're healthy. If they're healthy, I feel better, right? It's a reciprocal relationship. The problem is, it was not reciprocal with Henry and Victor. Henry did all of these things to help Victor Frankenstein, and Frankenstein did absolutely nothing in return. Nothing. Now, I will say, like, he speaks to the ship's captain. That's because that's how this is told. This is told by Frankenstein to a ship's captain in the Arctic after all of these events have already happened, and he speaks about Henry in the highest of praise. Right? He's showing that, or he's saying that, oh, I really appreciated this man. He probably did, but I feel like it was primarily based on reflection after the events of the journey. So after all of these things have happened, now he's like, oh, I should have appreciated him more. Yeah, yeah. Um, and again, if he would have just told Henry why he was upset and what he was working on constantly, if not, when Henry found him in university, then when they were in English countryside and he leaves him for 3 months again and is almost done with another creation and is like, no, and wrecks it all. If he would have just talked to Henry, he might still be alive. He might still be alive. So that's his like direct family, Elizabeth and Henry. But also we can see how neglectful he is clearly with the state of his creation. This man, Victor Frankenstein, spends several months working towards creating life, working towards putting together this, in his mind, this perfect creation. And he finally actually succeeds. And the creation barely takes a breath. And Victor bolts out the door. He's gone. He's out of there. And literally forgets about the thing for months on end. And after several months, turns into nearly 2 years. And they see each other briefly in the forest just outside of Geneva when Frankenstein's on his way back to comfort his family after William's death, his brother's death, without even a hesitation, with zero hesitation and also zero evidence. He immediately goes, "You killed my brother." No, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, he was correct, but he had zero evidence for it. None at all. It was crazy to just suddenly jump to that in my mind. He also fears his creation for no reason. He didn't even give it a chance to speak. He didn't even give his creation a name. I'm so sorry if the camera is shaking. My cat's going crazy. He just immediately had this unfounded fear of the creation and rejected it at every turn. He is the reason all of these things happened. Okay. I think this is a perfect way to wrap up my thoughts on Frankenstein, the person, Victor Frankenstein. I saw a meme one time that called Victor Frankenstein the original goth emo, woe is me, my life is pain, trust fund baby. And it's the most accurate description ever, I think. I can't think of a better way to describe Victor Frankenstein. So that's my thought on him. Hey, Dolly. Sorry, just messing with the tripod again. Okay, so the next character I want to walk through for a minute is Victor's father, Alphonse. I adored Alphonse. He was so, I don't know, he was just special. He was a special character. He was a great moral voice of reason. He was, my note says, the voice of reason in this godforsaken family, good Lord. quote, which I stand by. I stand by that. He had a beautiful view on life and morality and how to live a genuinely good life and how to strive for goodness despite the tragedy and grief you might go through along the way. And I think that's just such an important lesson in general. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about him because that sums up exactly how I feel about him. But I did want to read my favorite quote from him. This is the last quote I'm going to read, I promise. This is about when we lose someone and how we move on from that. Holly, oh my God. Okay. Is it not the duty of the survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by an appearance of immoderate grief? That's, to me, that's saying, it's a longer quote than that, but that's just my favorite parts. My brain is going all over the place today. Is it not the duty of the survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by appearance of immoderate grief? So that's saying there is a time to grieve. The immoderate grief is what he's specifically talking about. We can't let it consume our minds. We can't let it consume our entire life. It is tragic that they're gone. It's always a sad thing. And it's probably not going to leave you. It never does. That kind of loss never does leave you. But we owe it to them and their memory to be happy, not to live in the sorrow of their loss, but to live in the joy of their memories and the happiness that they brought us. And don't let their loss of life and their absence stop you from living your life, because that would make them unhappy too. And I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And it sums up who Victor's father is, Alphonse Frankenstein is as a person in general. He's gone through a lot of tragedy in his life. He lost his wife. He lost his youngest son. He lost the person that he views as his daughter. And he still keeps loving. And that's so important. And I adore Alphonse Frankenstein. The last character we're going to get into is the creation. This is a really great representation of nature versus nurture, that argument. If you're not familiar with that concept, it's an argument about whether people are born a certain way or if they're shaped by their upbringing. So, meaning nature, are they naturally predisposed to be a good person or a bad person? Or nurture, are they turned into by how they're raised and the events going on in their life around them? Are they shaped by their surroundings to be a good person or a bad person? And I think the creation is a great example of nature versus nurture. And in my opinion, he's basically starting as a blank slate, but it's a blank slate that is good at his heart, at his core. He is a good being, a good person, but he's shaped by society and by treatment of others to be this awful creation. And it's tragic, it really is, but I think it's a wonderful way to frame this argument. We had talked about earlier when he was first created, when he was first brought to life, the very instant of his birth, we'll call it his birth, abandoned, made to feel like a monster with no evidence. He didn't even have a word. He couldn't speak because he was just created. He just came to consciousness, and he immediately is just rejected completely by his own creator, by his own quote unquote father. That's terrible. Despite this first experience, we'll say, he still strives to be a good, in my eyes, he strives to be a friendly creation, a friendly person. He's literally a blank slate too. Like, he doesn't know anything. So we go through when they're chatting and Frankenstein finally sits down and allows his creation to tell his story, the story of his life so far. Reminder that this is only 2 years into his life, the creation's life. So he goes through and he tells us about discovering fire, learning to scavenge, learning to find shelter, learning to live and survive the winter. That's the way that he does all of that is extremely intelligent, just by observing and trial and error, and it's fantastic. But then he goes to town just to try to have some kind of companionship, just to talk to someone, and also out of just pure curiosity. And he's immediately chased out of there. People throw stones, the entire town chases him out of there. So he ends up in this shed next to a cottage where he sits there. I think it's for roughly a year, because they talk about the changing of the season. So I think it's roughly a year. And just through observation alone, he learns about family dynamics between this boy, his sister, and their father. He learns about love with the boy and this woman from their past that comes and becomes his wife. He learns French. He learns a language through observation alone. And all this time, he just wants companionship. So he goes and he tries to befriend the father, and again, is immediately chased off by the children. Everywhere he turns, it's just rejection, which is tragic. Then, unfortunately, due to this constant rejection and this shame that he feels just for existing, he does unfortunately kill William. That's Frankenstein's youngest brother. He does kill Henry. He does kill Elizabeth. All of this is tragic, but you could argue that he was just following the examples he was given, not examples of murder. None of these people were murderous towards him, although if he would have stuck around, the townspeople or this family, the DeLacy family, probably would have killed him. But if not the murder part, certainly cruelty. He was certainly given the example of cruelty, and that is not his fault. He was a lonely soul looking for companionship. That's all he was. And I'm not discrediting, like he did do those awful actions. I'm not excusing him from that. I don't plan to ever excuse him from that. But I feel like it just further proves the nature versus nurture argument. In this case, nurture. It's about how you treat others. You need to be conscious of your impact on others. At the end of the day, Victor Frankenstein's creation, I will not call him a monster, creation was an intelligent, curious being that just wanted love. He just wanted companionship, and he was tired. Not tired. He tried very hard to be kind at the beginning, and he was just constantly rejected, and it snowballed into what happened. Again, not excusing the awful acts that the creation did, but understanding. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So last section before I close all this out is just giving a moment of respect to Mary Shelley's writing. It was so beautiful. I said it at the beginning of this video, I did not expect to love her writing as much as I did. It was beautiful. I have quotes here. I have quotes written here. I'm not going to read them. That just stuck with me. That just stayed. They became part of my soul. And I adored her writing style. Just particularly, obviously, the reflection on society, but particularly the way that she would describe nature was just gorgeous. I never really cared about going to see Switzerland. Like, yeah, it would be cool to go to Switzerland, but it wasn't like a top list in my top destination in my mind. But after reading this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'll go to the Swiss Alps. Yep, I'm down. It was gorgeous writing. So good job, Mary Shelley. So to close all this out, I know I've barely scratched the surface of this book. I understand there's probably some areas, some messages that I've missed that I'll probably go back through at some point just to get a further understanding. In the best way possible, I'm starting to understand why people will spend years and sometimes their entire lifetimes. If we're looking at people like Tolkien with Beowulf, I can understand why they'll spend so much time rereading and analyzing different works and just like doing character studies and going through and re-experiencing these texts over and over and over. I think it's so much fun. This is the most fun I've had maybe ever analyzing a text. Like I said, I've analyzed text before, but not to this extent. And it's so much fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I started with Frankenstein for this. This was awesome. It will take me some time to get through these books because I don't have a ton of free time, And it does take time to properly, I feel like, dig through and analyze text, but it also takes time for me to write down my thoughts, organize my thoughts, film these videos. So it will take time. But I can tell you, I am 70 pages into Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, and I am loving it. It's so good so far. But no promises on an exact date. I will not be giving exact dates or timelines or anything like that for when I'll be finishing this book and filming that video. Just know that it will be coming at some point. With that being said, those were my thoughts on Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. If you have read it and you disagree or you agree with anything that I said, let me know. I'd love to have a conversation. If you feel like I'm being too harsh on Frankenstein, I personally don't think I am, but if you think I am, tell me why. And I'm always in the mood to have my mind changed. I'm a pretty open-minded person. I try to be, at least. So just let me know, and I would love to have that conversation with you. So for now, happy reading.